Greetings, welcome back to Black Bear News, where we are discussing abrupt climate change. And this is going to be a very quick video. I'm going to finish this article from yesterday. I am going out to play some music somewhere. So very, 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 very limited time. So where were we? Adding and multiplying it all together. Methane emissions increase global warming, which increases methane emissions, a feedback loop that makes this process difficult to reverse. Loss of reflective ice albedo increases absorption of solar radiation, wattage. Heating the Arctic even faster, melting more ice, producing more methane, and again, making the process extremely difficult to reverse. Yes, we could discuss more than 60 feedback loops, but why? There are enough here to wipe out every living creature on Earth in just a few years. Yes, we may make it for a decade or more, though that's a long shot, yes. Some underground bunkers or tribes deep in some jungle far away from all these man-made chemicals may weather the storm or migrate or figure out how to survive through so many toxins, heat waves, famines, loss of habitats, noxious gases wafting around the planet, dwindling oxygen supplies, near zero insect and plankton populations, and other dire trends. I like that, dire trends. Of course, we are the most brilliant species evolution or God, quote unquote, has ever created. Just ask an anthropologist or cleric, fine. But anyone who believes we should engineer the planet so it's a giant killing machine instead of engineering civilization so it both nurtures habitats and provides a sustainable platform for humanity is a suicidal idiot, if not a delusional optimist who has failed to audit what composes civilization today, not in 50 or 100 years. There is simply no way that the infrastructure we've relied on during the 20th century to reach 8 billion people is going to function under these conditions. There is simply no way either political or capital resources will rise to the challenge in time. They've proven that they are both far too slow and rely on far too many components inherent in human civilization today to function at the accelerated pace required to dodge extinction. Yes, there is a less than 1% chance we manage to dodge all these disasters and come out alive after more than a decade of engineering a toxic, patently lethal planet. But less than 1% odds is as slim as it gets. Okay, be an optimist and assume it's a 10% or even 50% chance we'll survive famine, wars, riots, droughts, pandemics, nuclear disasters, scorching temperatures, and all the other hazards described in this cursory list. Why on earth would we engineer our only planet, which once had abundant lush habitats, to become a hot rock barely able to support a billion, perhaps only a million people? Why would we allow the clock to run out on our chances, each year dividing that 1% chance by 10 or 100 or more? So it's less than one one thousandth of a percent chance, we can dodge extinction in just a year or two. 1/1000th, I can say that, I can. We're too slow, too stubborn, stupid, climate denial, too optimistic, psychosis, too divided, tribal, corrupt, and hateful. And rolling out solutions to mitigate these disasters already in progress is a pipe dream. We don't have time. Should we give up? Oh, hell no. What kind of silly question is that? We're far too stubborn for that. And just as shit happens, quote unquote, so do miracles, quote unquote. Of course, we should do our best to find practical, cost-effective solutions. The first idea being sequestered CO2 from the atmosphere and reducing ocean carbonic acid levels. Two processes we might actually engineer before we all die. It's a long shot, but it's not impossible, nor should we give up trying. I agree with that. And there are also a few other ideas that could. There was an article a while back about building a huge wind turbine farm in the North Atlantic. And yes, okay, there's lots of engineering problems with that, blah, blah, blah. But they were saying that if they could get it going, that it would actually drop the temperature of the Earth by a lot, by 20 C or something like that. So let's say you did that on a smaller scale. If if there was some massive engineering project and then there's also the idea of refreezing the Arctic with wind turbines. Again, yes, big engineering problems. I don't know. We're going to have to do something because we're going to have to. We're going to have to turn off all the nuclear plants too. We're going to have to. Put another way, if Monsanto can engineer GMO corn that effectively sterilizes women, look it up, one would hope that they could engineer a superplankton that could produce plenty of oxygen, absorb massive quantities of CO2, thereby lowering ocean acidification levels and global temperatures, while at the same time, GE, Raytheon, or some other bomb maker engineered the zero-emission power systems humanity might employ to reduce our own CO2 emissions. See Dr. Judy Wood. If you all don't know who that is, please look her up. Please look up her studies. She is probably the most credible and interesting person I've heard speak on 9/11 and other things. Pretty much ever. I can't think of. There's a few other people that I really think are capable of seeing the truth of what's going on. But she's pretty amazing lady. Where have I gone? Toss in a massive decrease in farm animals and reduce methane levels, figure out how to get methane out of the atmosphere, perhaps a sky-based organism that loves to digest methane, paint every city white, and force residents to grow a large percentage of the food they consumed indoors, recycle wastewater, eliminate fossil fuels altogether, along with plastics, and 1,000,001 other chemicals, decommission nuclear plants worldwide in under a year, and maybe that less than 1% chance might start looking like less than 2%, then 5, then 10, then 50. And hey, if we see another winter polar ice freeze in my lifetime, I will tap dance on tables and buy the bar around, guaranteed. It should be noted that all the various NASA, Stanford, and other scientists I've worked with over the years, and all the doomers out there, that my predictions and accelerated schedules for extinction are probably the worst of all of them, even slightly worse than the most famous of them all. There's a reason for that. I was always a scientist, the guy in every lab who ran my experiments in perhaps 10 to 15 minutes, tutored other kids, then played blackjack with the teacher in the back room while you jokers finished your experiments. And more often than not, stopped by the lab after school, scrubbed test tubes, cleaned up broken glass, and naturally took my science teachers for a few more quarters in blackjack before going home. There's a reason one of my first jobs at age 16 was sterilizing Petri dishes and stocking bench supplies for a large OBGYN clinic in Southern California. And that training meant that the decade I spent working for retired federal judge and judge pro tem as a clerk and field investigator ensured my research and predictions of worst case beat your research and delusional optimism. You can't work for judges and be wrong very often, or you get fired, and sometimes innocent people get the chair or life in prison. You have to be spot on and do your homework. So a huge part of the reason why my predictions and models are far more accurate than anything that IPCC or Michael Mann or James Hansen or Peter Wadhams have predicted is that their research in their limited fields pales in comparison. Oh, let me, by the way, say, let me go back here. The most famous of them all is Guy McPherson, of course, if you didn't understand who he was alluding to. Huge part of the reason my predictions and models are far more accurate than anything the IPCC or Michael Mann or James Hansen or Peter Wadhams have predicted is that their research in their limited fields pales in comparison to the vast amount of data I vacuumed from the internet each and every day the moment I wake up, usually around 4 a.m. I scrub the internet for new reports, new videos, new Arctic expeditions, and satellite data, then post it at one of the 140 websites I run, many of them on climate and DIY off-grid classes, all 100% free, since I really do want humanity to find a way out of this mess. There's a reason I am also keenly aware of the various technologies required, whether it's zero emission synthetic fuels or manufacturing water without creating offshore dead zones. from brine discharges, or even engineering a Tesla that never needs a charging station and has an unlimited range. Save stops for maintenance. Oh, tell me more. I've developed large infrastructure systems for the nuclear, wind, solar, desalination, distillation sectors for heads of state and military clients. Worked with the various corporations and entities described in the dedication page of this site. And when an Aramco engineer developing renewable energy systems for the Air Force read my analysis and engineering proposals, they remarked I was the only one who produced cost-effective practical designs. Heck, we had 5 blends of zero-emission synthetic fuels licked back when oil was kissing $150 a barrel. But the folks in Silicon Valley refused to fund the lab. Go figure. We had better wind turbines back in 2006, and multiple wind generator manufacturers bribed our engineers, mostly old guys, to retire. One mentor I loved dearly got a $250,000 offer from good old Vestas, and I told him to take it. His NASA pension was okay, but he needed new gear for his sailboat and his own Arctic adventures, and we didn't have that pile of cash. He was shocked, but I am practical and hate seeing people suffer. There's a reason blade designs I had already developed back in 2004 finally began appearing on GE wind turbines in 2011. There's a reason the renewable energy storage problem everyone keeps talking about was fixed more than a decade ago by our team, my Berker buddies. Yet after years of trying to raise capital to build a facility, buy a wind farm, and demonstrate its practical nature, we slowly gave up. It wasn't because we didn't want humanity to survive, and wasn't because of the bribes. It was mostly because the team and mentors I had were older than me, died off, and back then, especially after the crash, no one was funding startup energy companies. Sorry, we were on the desk at Lehman Brothers a month before they flamed out, and Goldman Sachs told us shortly thereafter, "We'd love to fund you fellas, but with the new Senate guidelines, we can't touch a corporation with no revenue." Fine, we get it. And when we did a small presentation for a Rothschild group, they realized the impact it might have on their oil earnings and went silent. After all, zero-emission synthetic fuel at the pump for $250 USD forever doesn't make oil companies too happy. There's a reason Elon Musk and Tesla never replied when we suggested we could engineer a Tesla that never needed a charging station. Of course, we're not sure why they never replied, but I'm sure there's a reason. Porsche, Audi did reply, but refused to finance the prototype. You can't blame them. When a pack of goofy scientists suggest they can do what $1 billion lab could not do, it sounds like smoke. It didn't matter that every engineer had a rock star pedigree background like NASA, Army Corps of Engineers, Genentech, White Sands Missile Range, etc. Nope, if it was a corps with no revenue, it was too risky. Well, fast forward another decade, and guess what? Humanity is toast, soon to be extinct. It's not that we didn't pump out literally thousands of emails and phone calls trying to avoid this disaster. It's not like thousands of other sharp engineers haven't also poured their heart and soul into fixing this mess with some great ideas. It's just that corporations operating under 20th century models and procedures are effectively obsolete, if not obviously suicidal. Rex Tillerson once said he'd love to have a feedstock plant in the middle of a refinery so that they never had to ship crude again. When he became Secretary of State and Woods took over, we wrote and called him too. Silence. Finally, we don't care of ExxonMobil or BP if ExxonMobil or BP remains filthy rich, as long as they stop producing oil and gas or any other fuel that emits CO2. Go tell that to Putin and see how Russia responds to such a proposal. Enjoy the cocktail you get at the Putin payment party. It'll be your last, because Russia, China, the US, India, Brazil, Japan, Canada, and every other nation on earth is still operating under obsolete, patently suicidal 20th century policies and corporate government objectives. Everyone except Trump, of course. He doesn't realize that if he built his silly wall as a 2,500-mile canal with a string of wind and solar farms, he could probably power the entire US. Actually, didn't Trump, he said something about that. So anyways, he actually said something about having it be like a huge solar panel or whatever. But help replace a lot of the agriculture we're losing and even make a giant long labor camp. But he won't do that, I'm sure. But that stretch from San Diego to Brownsville, I'm sure they'll get right on it. We tried to help poor little Jordan and found 5 years later, our proposal was finally chosen. But despite so many progressive policies there, the ability to work with us to acquire funding to make that poor nation water and crop rich never got traction, even though the plan has also included helping Egypt pay off its entire national debt and become a fuel-rich nation, producing plenty of zero-emission fuel or domestic consumption for domestic consumption and export. Imagine how much zero-emission fuel windy Somalia, Horn of Africa could produce. Now imagine the raging winds of the Bering Sea or Antarctica, or the scorching sunshine of Sahara, Arizona, or even Australia, especially Australia. They're not buying, even when we were literally giving it away. Everyone has their own ideas, their own budgets and schedules, their own preconceived notions about how much time we have left and what kinds of innovative infrastructure is required to solve humanity's energy, food, and water and climate issues. The Paris Climate Accord was supposed to fix this. So we built the largest Paris Climate Accord website on Earth, accordtoparis.org, complete with the dire intro. And once past that, there's chat rooms and ways to reach out to engineers all around the world, as well as tools, tips, and policies mayors can use to make their communities both zero emission and fund the transition locally. We even built in plenty of jobs and revenue from exporting products and talent from every city on Earth. So we presented some of this to the Rotary Club in a very wealthy city. They almost threw fruit when we told them their funding for their own local transformation could easily come from adding a $1 to $2 tax on every gallon of petrol at the pump, doubling that tax each year. How many people would still own a gas diesel vehicle with such a tax? We even told them that folks could keep their conventional engines and use zero-emission fuels. They could even use their own cars to power their homes, reducing and potentially eliminating any need for a local utility. That got a laugh, a snarl, and let's face it, utilities would fight that to the death. We discussed a lot of this technology with local engineers in Puerto Rico after Hurricane Maria, and while they were receptive, subsequent attempts at contact have received no reply. They have their plans, their objectives, and their innovative ideas, and we don't blame them. Rather, we continually remind folks, you don't have that much time, if any, left, and in each and every case, we've seen some illogical ideas like biomass, biodiesel, etc., which are neither effective nor required. Batteries and capacitors for renewable energy storage, that's insane and expensive and has limits. Just as pumping water up to a lake and capturing energy as it's released is a great idea, practical and already functional in a few locations, but not nearly as efficient or cost-effective or environmentally friendly as other ways of achieving energy storage. The point here is that we had great ideas, as does your nephew and the mayor's daughter-in-law. But the world lacks a unified coalition capable of rolling out a massive engineering plan in each and every city on Earth to handle the wide spectrum of challenges. We could probably build that plan and contacted Governor Brown months before the SF's climate summit. Say that 10 times fast. Climate summit. Governor Brown's staff doesn't return calls either. Go figure. This is supposedly one of, if not the most enlightened tree hugger on Earth. But when we suggested California could not only produce a huge amount of zero emission power and synthetic fuel, as well as solve California's raging decade of drought, no answer. Oh, that's because Governor Brown is sold out. There is no doubt. So when we suggest humanity has less than 1% chance of dodging extinction due to a wide variety of challenges and a lethargic, if not near coma level of response from political and capital resources, it's not as if we haven't seen this play out for more than a decade, actually 2 decades, if we consider NASA Jerry's trips to the Arctic in his tiny sailboat to prove global warming is real. One day, back in 2007, when oil was kissing $150 a barrel, I did a pitch in front of a bunch of Silicon Valley VC lawyers in a room with about 20 people, each discussing various websites and nearby technologies. It's a group I'm familiar with, as I happen to have a artificial intelligence, quantum computing encryption, and attack detection patent under my belt. But on this day, I was representing the scientists and engineers, chemists, and rocket fuel production group who had developed 5 synthetic fuels we figured could be sold at the pump for $2.50 a gallon forever and used on conventional vehicles was about $1,000 to $2,000 in modifications. We really liked 2 of these formulas as they don't burn even if you put a match to them. And unlike oil, if you spill them on the ground, plants flourish. How cool is that? So I get up there and begin to describe what we had developed, and the lawyer panelist stops me and asks me, "Excuse me, do you know where you are?" Sure, I replied. This is Silicon Valley. Or Silicon Valley, excuse me, Kim. At which point he reminded me, that's right, and we do websites, routers, and electronics. We don't do energy. Next, I was floored. We had obviously come to present $100 trillion global revolution to a room where they could only think in the billions, and only if it could be made in a chip factory or on a web designer's laptop. My mistake, huge. We talked to some kid who worked for T. Boone Pickens, the man who almost went bankrupt with his Texas wind farm projects. That fizzled. We talked to folks at Tres Amigas, at that time, the largest substation in development in the US. He loved it, but had his own agenda and funding schedule, and we weren't in their budget. This is not a plea for capital to build the lab, rather simply a blow-by-blow history on how our little group got tossed around by all kinds of people, not the least being a head of state, who when presented with the concept of turning their small, impoverished nation into a cash cow for synthetic fuels, whispered in my ear, I own $100 million in oil stock, and then leaned back and winked at me, which in no uncertain terms meant I really don't care if these projects go through. While working in that nation to develop their infrastructure plan, we had multiple senators and congressmen found to have been bribed by ExxonMobil, who supplies the nation with its fuel, to throw us under the bus. We were proud we finally got to the legislature to pass new renewable energy laws and proposed projects unanimously, but it was really just lipstick on a pig to look good to their voters, since they never did a damn thing with any of it. While the level of wide whispered threats, i.e. you could wind up buried on a beach, rose during that fun process. So the world is locked into a suicidal spiral. While innovative technology is certainly out there, ours, yours, your neighbors, the guy in India, the team in China, Sweden, Turkey, wherever you point, there's someone with a better idea to solve the world's energy problem. As a species, we're too slow, too corrupt, too stubborn, too constrained by conventional thinking, and too biased against outsiders, let alone goofy NASA, Stanford, MIT, Texas, and A&M and other engineers, to move forward on a practical, effective schedule to dodge extinction. Mother Nature doesn't care. She has a schedule and she's ramping it up quickly. She has a fever and she's going to cure it by wiping this toxic species, Homo incendius, fire ape, off the map. Where are we? Okay. A little humor might illustrate this point. A couple of planets were sipping Cosmos at the Galaxy Bar. How's your moon? One asked. Oh, she'll get over that asteroid impact, but you don't look too well. Oh, I have a bad case of the humans. High fever plus coming out of every nook and cranny, everything's dying. Pus coming out of every nook and cranny, everything's dying. It's really painful. Well, don't worry, it never lasts long. And that just about sums up the past, present, and future of humanity. Unless we capitalize on the less than 1% chance of dodging extinction, we are toast. And it's not going to take the 10 or 20 or 50 or 100 years. We have less than a decade, and in fact, all life, including humans, may very well be extinct in just 1 to 2 years. Ouch. The brutal hockey stick equation. Michael Mann hates me when I talk like this. He'll post some YouTube video, and I'll try to be nice, citing all the wonderful math he's done, the research he cites, and I do appreciate his ability to bring a lot of this math to the general public with cute cartoons and dire warnings. But when I suggest he's a delusional optimist and can't or won't actually apply the real-time events and that math to his equation, and I suggest that we don't have decades, let alone a century, to dodge extinction, he likes to flap his pie hole with insults, attacking the people making those predictions rather than actually spend time like a lab chum and examine the math behind the claims. I have suggested perhaps he doesn't know how to actually create the quadratic equation that describes an accurate hockey stick that actually models reality. It's not that tough, and I predicted Irma, Harvey, Maria, Ophelia, wow, Ireland, and now Florence, more than a year before they took place, more than 2 years in the case of Florence. My problem and the bane of my existence is, despite being the most dire of any scientist I know, nature still accelerates events compared to my predictions, though my errors are not nearly as inaccurate as the IPCC or illustrious as Michael Mann, or the illustrious Michael Mann. The quadratic equation that defines a curve or a trend line, such as how hot will it get and by when, or how big a hurricane will we get and when, or where and when, or how bad will crop losses be and when will the famine become a disaster in wealth nations, things like that, is actually not too difficult to calculate. A very simple quadratic equation basically reads, reads x equals a plus b over c squared, whereby some factor, or is that b into c or b divided by c, or b over c squared, excuse me, whereby some factor such as a, when adjusted by some exponent, it might be squared, cubed, or just exist with little or no modification, and added to b forms a slope or pressure to rise up. And as you divide that sum, I know to people who are aware of the math thing, I just destroy that equation. But anyways, whatever. As you divide that sum by c modified, it can reduce the rising slope or even cause it to fall. This is basic simple mechanics of such quadratic equation. The problem with Kliman's calculations is an accurate picture involves a lot of operands, factors above the line, a, b, and n, or a, b through n, all influencing and enhancing each other positive feedbacks and increasing the rise, with very few operands below the line, c, d, and n, to dampen the slope. Now, if you add or multiply a lot of operands above the line and don't dampen it with anything much below the line, like carbon sequestering, it's not hard to predict. Well, when ocean temps were 80 Fahrenheit and produced a lot of Cat 3 hurricanes with a few Cat 5s, and this year or next year, ocean temps will be 85 Fahrenheit, we can easily predict a lot more Cat 5 record breakers like Irma and Maria, which will hit Dominica as a Cat 1 and exited that island as a Cat 5 in a heartbeat, going on to destroy Puerto Rico. What a rage. Not many people predicted Ophelia would reach island, but back in 2016, I told multiple people we'd have a series of hurricanes in summer 2017 that would devastate the US unlike anything we'd seen before. I thought we'd basically see multiple buzzsaws chew up the East Coast and send Trump a message he wouldn't forget. I was wrong by region. And Houston and Puerto Rico took the big hit, but I was not wrong by intensity, nor was I wrong when I predicted some 2017 hurricane would stray much farther north than anything we'd seen before. Hello, Ophelia. And then the 2018 hurricane season gets underway, and poof, we have the East Coast buzzsaw I thought we'd see in 2017. Yes, I was off by a year on my region prediction, but I have a feeling Florence won't be the only hurricane to rip up the eastern seaboard this year. What drives me crazy is when these scientists suggest we can't attribute a single storm to a global warming. That is deceptive BS and misses the point. It's a waste of breath, designed solely to make a scientist appear conservative, when we can absolutely predict a massive increase in the devastation almost solely to global warming, especially ocean warming. And we can absolutely predict a rapid increase in frequency and intensity and level of destruction, loss of life, and cost to infrastructure. These are all no-brainers, but apparently most scientists around the world don't have the brains to create a reasonably accurate quadratic equation or basic theory about why we should expect a massive increase in the destruction each year will bring to humanity. It's not rocket science. It's really almost as simple as a dark blue kiddie pool in the backyard on a hot sunny day. For any parent who's had one of those out, you may notice on some days that the water is so hot it can scald a child quite badly. No rocket science there either. So that as the dire predictions and equations made in this article, far from the level of detail made in the recent Uninhabitable Earth article, and not meant to be a comprehensive list, rather a simple study of a few key factors, operands, leading humanity straight to the extinction in barely a blink. It is my hope that rather than getting depressed about the situation, you'll read the summary classes on this simple website, explore a few other sites and links we've provided here, talk to your local mayors about creating a local fund to transform your own communities, as well as stop pouring precious capital into stupid stuff like infrastructure below the 7,100 meter or 200 to 300 foot elevation. Rather, pour your resources into building underground cities, grow rooms, air scrubbers, wind, solar, PV, concentrated solar, geothermal, et al., and do your best locally to brace your community for what is unfolding today, not in 2030, 2050, or 2100. I'm not suggesting we will succeed, but neither am I giving up. I'm not suggesting humans have a chance, given our nuclear issues, which must be solved quickly, almost instantly, or nothing else we do will matter much anyways. I am suggesting that somehow, some way, instead of bashing each other about our goofy or great ideas, you, not me, needs to go to your mayor and take the plunge. Install a $1 to $2 local tax on every gallon of gas, diesel at the pump, and channel that revenue into hardening and upgrading your local civil infrastructure, including self-sufficient hospitals that can handle scorching temperatures, local microgrids, building codes that allow a car running inexpensive zero-emission fuels to power homes and apartments at night, charging batteries or other storage mechanisms for when the car is away during the day, or plastering your area with sufficient solar and or wind to completely eliminate fossil fuels from your community energy plan. Not by 2040, as some goofy, ignorant, suicidal, delusionally optimistic Governor Brown thinks is prudent, but rather in just 1 or 2 years at most. And while you're at it, you better figure out how you're going to get your water and food locally, because you can all but forget about getting that through imports at this raging fire, as this raging fire spreads throughout the world. You don't have 5 or 10 years to complete this transition. You either get your act together and hit all the right targets, including solving the nuclear issues, or you, your children, your friends, and neighbors all die. It's really not that complicated of an equation, and one would think you'd be ready, willing, and able to pull it off. Okay. I am a delusional optimist too. Go figure. Someone's got to root for your children, and most reasonably educated parents today have all but given up hope. Don't. There is a lot to take in that article, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. I hope you did too. I know already from the first half that I read yesterday, there's a lot of discussion, debate on, timelines and whether, there's debate about this timeline and the rapidity of it. It doesn't really matter whether it's 1 or 2 years or 5 years or 10 years. It doesn't really matter. I concur. I think that there are many things that we can do, and I think we're wasting time not doing them. So the one thing about the going to your local mayor and getting a $1 or $2 tax, again, that's going to run into the same wall that the writer of this article ran into presenting zero emission fuels to investors, is that you're going to go to your mayor and they're going to be just like, hell no, get out of my office. Like, what are you talking about? Go away. Goodbye. See you later. Sayonara. We are up against a huge wall. That wall is a political wall. That wall is a political will. That will has to be broken before anything can be done. So we either have to find a way to do this in collectives on our own, and we're going to have to find a way to do it in collectives on our own while probably fighting with the government, or fighting against the laws, or possibly getting thrown in jail, possibly, being derailed by the alphabet agencies, whereas there is, the wall is immense. The will is there. The wall is huge. I just think that, there are plenty of good ideas out there, and there are plenty of people in the comment sections that have the will and have the knowledge and have the great ideas to put forward. We really have to, what really is a horrible reality is that we're not going to be able to do any of this until we break that wall. So we have to start coming up with ideas and ways to break that wall first before we even implement these great ideas. That all of that must be broken. The oligarchy, the corporatocracy, the corporate state must be taken out, taken down, sidelined, diminished, put asunder. That's what needs to happen. That is not, and that is for the sake of humanity. For the sake of humanity, because all of those things right now are instruments of death. All of those things right now are operating in a morally illegal, on a morally bankrupt plane of existence. Like, none of those things have any legitimacy at all. The powers that be have no legitimacy at all in the realm of climate change, in the realm of the biosphere, in the realm of saving not just humanity, but all of life on Earth. All of those things are in the service of evil. So they are illegitimate. They're illegitimate in all possible ways. So there's nothing, there's no reason to defend those things. There's no reason to support those things. There's no reason to keep propping those things up. How we are going to disassemble or disperse those entities, I have no idea. They have a lot of guns. They have a lot of power. They have the whole corporate media apparatus, which is clearly brainwashing everybody. And plenty of people on this channel are brainwashed by the corporate media. Plenty of people are on this channel are like, well, they said this happened, you know. Plenty of people are not. I'm not, you know, I'm just saying there's a lot of y'all out there that are like, well, you know, because these, you know, official entities said so, I'm going to go with that. All of those entities are in the service of making your life and your children's life end. So stop it with that, please stop it with that. That's all I have to say. I'm rambling on and on and on. I gotta go. Thank you so much for your eyes, your ears, and your conscience. If you would like to support this channel, you can do so with the links below. Until next time, peace.